Welcome back to the history of the papacy in 10 minutes or less. At least we try. Definitely no more than 15 minutes. Today we have a really special episode presented by someone you are likely to be familiar with if you watch this channel or listen to the History of the Papacy podcast. Glenn has been a guest on the show a number of times on the topic of papal encyclicals. Today, Glenn is presenting a topic on the prominent and important 20th century Catholic monastic Thomas Merton. So I hope you enjoy this special video presentation on papal and church history in 10 minutes. Thank you to all our patrons on patreon.com. And I mean, you guys really go a long way on helping make this whole operation work. So I want to thank you especially for all your support. And thank you, Glenn, for presenting this episode. And I'll talk to you guys soon.
Hi, my name is Glenn Amorosia. And thanks Steve for letting me be on his History of the Papacy to talk about one of my favorite authors, Thomas Merton. And I'd like to give credit to the Thomas Merton Center in Bellarmine University in Kentucky for providing some of this biographical information on Mr. Merton. Thomas Merton, born in 1915, died in 1968. He's arguably the most influential American Catholic author of the 20th century. His autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain, has sold over 1 million copies. It has been translated into over 15 languages. He wrote over 60 other books and hundreds of poems and articles on topics ranging from monastic spirituality to civil rights, nonviolence, and the nuclear arms race. This is a picture of Father Merton, also known as Brother Lewis at the monastery. There are a number of people who gave stirring tributes to Thomas Merton, and one of those was President Bill Clinton. In his tribute at the funeral of Georgia Congressman and civil rights icon John Lewis, 1940 to 2020, who died of cancer on July 17, 2020. Bill Clinton referred to the events of March 7, 1965, when Lewis was severely beaten by Alabama state troopers at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma as he led a group of 600 demonstrators on a march to the state capital of Montgomery. Clinton said that in his backpack, Lewis had, among other items, the autobiography of Thomas Merton, a Roman Catholic Trappist monk who was the son of itinerant artist, making an astonishing personal transformation. What's a young guy who's about to get his brains beat out and planning on going to prison doing that? I think he figured that if Merton could find his way, he, John Lewis, could too. This icon is drawn by Father William Hart McNichols, a classmate of mine when I went to high school, and he's done many wonderful icons. Another tribute to Father Merton was from Pope Francis. In 2015, 50 years after Merton's death, Pope Francis spoke before the United States Congress of Merton's extraordinary work in revealing the unity of authentic religious experiences and recommended him to the people of the United States as one of the 4 exemplars especially worthy of emulation, saying of Merton that he was a thinker who challenged the certitudes of his time and opened new horizons for souls and for the church, a man of dialogue, a promoter of peace between peoples and religions. Here's a picture of the young Thomas Merton. After a rambunctious youth and adolescence, Merton converted to Roman Catholicism while at Columbia University. On December the 10th, 1941, he arrived at the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky, a community of monks belonging to the Order of Cistercians of the Strict Observance, also known as Trappists, the most ascetic Roman Catholic monastic order. The 27 years he spent at Gethsemane brought about profound changes in his self-understanding. This ongoing conversion impelled him into the political arena, where he became, according to Daniel Berrigan, the conscience of the peace movement of the 1960s. Referring to race and peace as the 2 most urgent issues of our time, Merton was a strong supporter of the nonviolent civil rights movement, which he called certainly the greatest example of Christian faith in action in the social history of the United States. For his social activism, Merton endured severe criticism from Catholics and non-Catholics alike, who assailed his political writings as unbecoming of a monk. During his last years, he became deeply interested in Asian religions, particularly Zen Buddhism, and in promoting East-West dialogue. After several meetings with Merton during the American monk's trip to the Far East in 1968, the Dalai Lama, pictured here, praised him as having a more profound understanding of Buddhism than any other Christian he had known. It was during this trip to a conference on East-West monastic dialogue that Merton died near Bangkok on December 10, 1968. The date marked the 27th anniversary of his arrival at Gethsemane. I became attracted to Merton and his writings in the early 1970s during the protests of the Vietnam War. As Berrigan said, Merton was the conscience of the peace movement, surprising that both he was a Catholic and a monk at that. I first read his book entitled On Peace. That led me to read his autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain. The Story Mountain was written, but in all literature. He had written his master's thesis on the poet William Blake, who then became one of my favorite poets. From The Seven-Story Mountain, I developed a reading list that I followed throughout my life that not only included Blake and Merton, but also Faulkner, Eliot, Proust, Rilke, and several others. Further readings of Merton, who was noted above, reached 60. I found relatively easy reading, an expansive knowledge of history, as well as the contemporary scene. In my simplistic categorization, he has three main streams of writing: his writings on war and racism, his writings on his life as a contemplative, and his writings on other religions. I say this list is simplistic because in most of his writings, these themes overlap. Several are in the form of journals, plus these themes can be found in many of his poems. So where does the novice reader of Merton start? This is a difficult question, but a must is his autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain. From there, assembling the reading list gets more difficult, but here are some that I have read and would recommend. The first book I would like to recommend, No Man is Island, which he wrote in 1955. Here in one of his most popular of his more than 60 books, Merton provides further meditations on the spiritual life in 16 thoughtful essays. Beginning with his classic treatise, Love Can Be Kept Only by Being Given Away. This book provides fresh insight into Merton's favorite topics of silence and solitude, while also underscoring the importance of community and the deep connectedness to others that is the inevitable basis of the spiritual life, whether one lives in solitude or in the midst of a crowd. The next book I would like to recommend, also in the area of contemplation, is New Seeds of Contemplation, which he wrote in 1962. New Seeds of Contemplation is admired by both Christians and non-Christians alike, praising it as a notable successor in the meditative tradition of St. John of the Cross and the medieval mystics, while others have compared Merton's reflections with those of Thoreau. New Seeds of Contemplation seeks to awaken the dormant inner depths of the spirit, so long neglected by Western man, to nurture a deeply contemplative and mystical dimension in our lives. For Merton, every moment and every event of every man's life on earth plants something in his soul. The next book I'd like to recommend is Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, written in 1965. In this series of notes, opinions, experiences, and reflections, Thomas Merton examines some of the most urgent questions of our age. He brings the reader face to face with such provocative and controversial issues as the death of God, politics, modern life and values, and racial strife issues that are as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. And the last Merton book that I'm going to recommend today is The Asian Journals of Thomas Merton. This book was published in 1975 after his death. This is the journal that Merton kept on the journey to Asia where his life ended. Also is a culmination of his long spiritual journey as a writer. We find him ranging from Tantric Buddhism to Zen, and from Islam and Sufism to Vedanta. This book is the fruit of such learning, including descriptions of his meeting with the young Dalai Lama, transcriptions of talks that Merton gave during the trip. Most lovingly, however, the journal concludes with a narrative of his transformative experiences in Ceylon, where he visited three colossal figures of Buddha carved from huge stone, pictured here. Surely, he writes, my Asian pilgrimage has come clear and purified itself. A few days later, he passed away. Shown here is a picture of the hermitage where Merton lived in solitude for the last 3 years of his life, a place that he had dreamed of for many years. So why should people want to read Thomas Merton? I'm going to quote here from Jonathan Montaldo in the Merton Seasonal of Spring 2020, writing a note to himself on April 14, 1966. Thomas Merton isolated his best writing into a category of quote-unquote confession and witness, in opposition to his writing that was authoritarian, the declaration of musts, and the announcement of punishments. His best writing offered personal, creative reflections that inquired and appraised, appealed at readers, and evoked their loves for God. Going on to quote Montaldo on why we should read Merton, his transparency in writing about himself has a twofold effect. It aimed first to deflect the reader from idolizing his artfully portrayed inner experiences and his idealized pictures of his monastic life at Gethsemane. More importantly, he meant his reader to hear his confessions and identify with his struggles as like to their own. There are no easy formulas to follow. If one tries to love wisdom and desire God, that is the only way. So thank you for letting me present this short presentation on Thomas Merton, and I hope you will find the time and inspiration to read some of his works also. Thank you very much.